Welcome back to the Virginia Democratic Small Business Caucus Show. Live, glad to have you back on May the 11th, 2022, as we bring you to another fantastic show. Always coming in with Bob, let you know that you love. That's right. Woo! Don't let them fool you, folks. We're about to get started with our favorite intro person, Bob Marley. Oh, yeah, don't let them school you either. All right. Hey, folks, welcome back. Welcome back here on May 11th. The Virginia Democratic Small Business Caucus Show, live. And we're so happy to have you back as we have a very exciting show for you again. Well, we like to call it informative, informal, and engaging. Exciting, but at least you're going to learn a few things. You're going to meet a special guest along the way. We're pretty much what you see is what you get. We're not a real shiny and glitzy outfit, but what we are is we try to get right to the point and then give you a little bit of information from somebody who is a small business or involved in small business, or either some sort of person who is also one of our activists or politicians, or just plain old Joe, it doesn't matter, or Josephine. Anyway, we're glad to have you back. And listen, I just want to tell you once again, COVID is still out there. It's not over yet. We start that with every show and let people know, listen, make sure you're keeping yourself safe. I took a trip recently, did a little bit of traveling. And of course, I was at the airport and I traveled. Certain people had on masks, certain people didn't have on masks. I was a little more alert. I didn't keep my mask on all the time, especially normally I would wear it a little more often. Things seem to be loosening up a little bit. But anyway, I did travel out of town, stayed a couple of days and came back. Folks are seem to be getting a little bit looser, and things are getting better from the economic standpoint. Now we're just having to deal with all those troubles and things that are coming along with a little bit of inflation coming from the COVID and all the things that are going on with what's going on around the world. But I think all in all, the United States has been able to avoid most of the hard times that a lot of other countries have had to deal with. And that's just a blessing. So keep yourself safe. Hopefully you've had your shots. Hopefully you're keeping yourself distance when you need to keep yourself distance. Wear your mask when you need to wear it, don't wear it. Make a choice from getting those shots, boosters and all. But whenever you're ready, you need to get those things that you need, and just keep yourself and your family safe. But it really is a pleasure just seeing you back here today. And folks, we've got a great show coming up. I'm going to do what I normally do. I'm going to talk a little bit about small business, talk a little bit about voting rights. That's my favorite subject. We hammer on that every time around. And then about 10, 15 minutes into the show, we're going to bring on our special guest. And we usually always have someone who brings something interesting to you, something for you to see and something for you to think about. And we've got a great guest. So I might even bring him on longer. I've known this gentleman a long time. I want to kill the surprise. I'm not going to say it too soon, but those of you that saw the advertisement, you kind of know who it is, but everybody doesn't know. And everybody kind of jumps in. You know how it is. Everything's on demand. You may not be watching the show now, but people go back and grab the show when they're ready to check it out. So really, I'm just going to go on to the next thing and talk a little bit about a few things I want to talk about today. And, I just want to give a little bit of education on just the trinity of really civil rights in this country, civil rights, voting rights, the Fair Housing Act, all these sorts of things, which really give us the basis of what voting rights is all about in this country and protecting the rights that all Americans have. And those rights, basically, women's right to choose, sort of thing that we're dealing with now, all those things stem from what? Voting rights. They stem from civil rights. And those sort of things that we need to make sure we have out there to make sure Americans can do what they need to do, vote for who they want to vote for, and make sure that they get the proper representation that they want to have. It all comes from voting rights. Voting rights are foundational to any democracy. They're the air that essentially keeps the lungs of democracy breathing, in your right to get the representation that you ought to have. And today, I'm going to make sure I take a little opportunity to talk about it. And I'm going to move right into that by bringing up our first little short video today. I'm working by myself today, so you got to see me fumble around my technology a little bit, but I think I can get it right here. Here we go. I think this is the right one. I'm going to bring it up, and we are going to add that to the stream, and we're going to, we're going to 1964 Civil Rights Explained.
The 1964 Civil Rights Bill was the most significant.
Wait a minute.
It meant the Southern.
Hold on a second. Here we go. Don't worry, I pressed the wrong button, but I'll get it right. Here we go. Yeah, full screen. Here we go. We're going to talk a little bit about the 1964 Civil Rights. Here we go.
The 1964 Civil Rights Bill was the most significant piece of legislation in 20th century U.S. history. Systematic racial prejudice was the greatest stain on America's reputation, and the 64 bill did much to remove it. With its passing, the federal government upheld substantial laws against racial discrimination and paved the way for a full redress of a damaging problem. After the American Civil War and the first Reconstruction, the ex-Confederate states relapsed into segregation. A network of racist fiats termed Jim Crow laws saw that public facilities, washrooms, water fountains, hotels were segregated. The justice system overwhelmingly favored whites, and jobs were limited to the menial. In the South, segregation founded on the separate but equal doctrine established in Plessy v. Ferguson 1898 meant that blacks were confined to second-class status. This was mirrored by de facto segregation in the North. Although not legally inferior, Northern blacks were not able to access good quality housing or jobs. In response, CR advocacy groups were formed throughout the early 20th century. The Big Four were the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, formed in 1909, the Congress of Racial Equality, formed in 1942, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, formed in 1957, and the Student Nonviolent Coordination Committee, formed in 1960. Each lobbied the government, and together they coordinated protests. The federal government did little in response. Southern politicians vetoed any attempts to pass legislation. Blacks didn't have the ability to wield their vote in protest, and the ex-Confederate South was uniformly opposed to racial advancement. President Roosevelt had maintained popularity among low-income blacks with his New Deal policies. And President Truman desegregated the Army in 1948, but little was done to improve the lot of the average black citizen. A few racial incidents, such as the murder of Emmett Till, the aborted registration of Autherine Lucy at Alabama University, and the Montgomery bus boycott, had given the issue some exposure in the North, but ignorance and inertia of modern whites continued to be an issue. In 1954, the separate but equal doctrine was rejected by the Supreme Court in Brown v. Board of Education. Its unanimous ruling that segregated public schools were inherently unequal mandated the federal government to desegregate schools, paving the way for a series of crises that would expose Southern prejudice. The first came in 1957, when President Truman sought to integrate Little Rock High School in Arkansas. He deployed federal troops when Governor Orville Faubus opposed the ruling, and ultimately saw that the school was integrated. The trend continued under the Kennedy administration. Throughout the early 1960s, a number of racial crises put pressure on the administration to do something significant. In the Freedom Rides of April 1961, two groups of activists tested the Supreme Court ruling that all interstate travel facilities must be desegregated by riding buses throughout several southern states. They were met in Anniston, Birmingham, and Montgomery by groups of white supremacists. Their buses were burned, and the activists were savagely beaten. There was clear collaboration between the police and the KKK, and the Kennedy administration's actions were limited to damage control. In early 1961, James Meredith, a black World War II veteran, had his application to study at the University of Mississippi rejected purely on racial grounds. The Kennedy administration intervened on Meredith's behalf, but Mississippi Governor Ross Barnett calculated that it was politically impossible for him to accept the ruling. Tensions culminated in a standoff between U.S. Marshals and a racist mob outside the university on September 30th. Nearly 100 marshals were injured, but the administration was credited with calmly fulfilling its promise. JFK had always refused to denounce racist actions in moral terms, taking the position that he was merely following the letter of the law. However, protests in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963 proved seminal. Project C was a protest designed to provoke a violent reaction from the city's thuggish police commissioner, Eugene Bull Connor. Connor craved publicity and was prepared to use significant force in suppressing the protests. A march on the city hall saw police clash with protesters, many of whom were children. The use of dogs and fire hoses produced horrific scenes that created an international outcry and spawned a sequence of national protests. Introducing legislation was now a viable political proposition. Before Birmingham, the lack of national awareness and feeling for the issue had meant the Southern Caucus could dominate discussions of race. But now, JFK had a popular mandate to pursue legislation. This he did, giving a national address that called for legislation because it is right. His unprecedented moral tone committed the federal government to realizing substantive legislation. The legislation itself was remarkably broad. Emulating the 1875 Civil Rights Act, it included a public accommodations title, Title II, that outlawed discrimination in access to public facilities, as well as reaffirming and protecting the universal right to vote. It also strengthened both the Attorney General's authority to intervene in school desegregation cases and provisions against discrimination in federally funded institutions. JFK was assassinated before the bill could make substantial progress. It had passed the Judiciary Committee, but languished in the Senate Finance Committee, headed by arch-segregationist Harry Byrd. The assassination was initially considered a hammer blow for the cause. Vice President Lyndon Johnson, who was a member of the Southern Caucus, had a poor voting record on civil rights and seemingly didn't have the political security to pursue such a risky initiative. However, Johnson was emotionally committed to advancing civil rights. In his first address to Congress as president, Johnson said, "No memorial oration or eulogy could more eloquently honor President Kennedy's memory than the earliest passage of the Civil Rights Bill for which he fought so long." Johnson recognized that JFK's substantial income tax cut was hampering the Civil Rights Bill's progress. Johnson dislodged the tax bill by promising Harry Byrd that he would bring the national budget in below $100 billion. In doing so, he cleared the way for the Civil Rights Act, which passed the Rules Committee and House of Representatives with relative ease. The Senate was a different story. A Southern bloc of 18 Southern Democrats and one Republican, led by Richard Russell, was resolved to destroy the bill. Using Vice President Hubert Humphrey as a proxy, Johnson cajoled congressmen and senators into backing the bill. He crucially got Everett Dirksen and his votes on side, and in doing so won enough votes to pass a cloture vote. Dirksen was not emotionally committed to civil rights reform, but he was compelled to accept the political necessities that undermined it, and his vote saw a new supportive majority formed. The bill passed the Senate 77-23 and was signed into law on July 2, 1964. Although the bill didn't produce significant immediate improvements in the lives of Black Americans, it gave the federal government the tools to expunge systemic prejudice. And, along with the 1965 Voting Rights Bill, which reinforced some of the 64 bill's provisions, saw that the federal government was broadly supportive of equality and justice.
Well, there we go. An excellent layout of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and basically laying the ground for what would come into being the Voting Rights Act. And these civil rights are the things that form the basic foundations and reinforce the foundations that Americans have today. Let me bring up the next video real quick, which is going to be on a shorter video. Let's see here, on the civil rights This one is only 5 minutes, and it should take us into our guest.
Despite the ratification of the 15th Amendment in 1870 that protected citizens' right to vote based on race and previous condition of servitude, things like poll taxes, literacy tests, and the grandfather clause were still allowed due to the Supreme Court's poor interpretation of the amendment. In United States v. Reese, William Garner, an African-American, was denied the right to vote by 2 election inspectors by the name of Hiram Reese and Matthew Fauci. Reese and Fauci said that Garner refused to pay the poll tax, but in reality, Garner tried to pay the tax but was refused by the tax collector. When this case eventually went to the Supreme Court, they determined that the language of the Enforcement Act of 1870 was too broad and that the 15th Amendment did not ban things like poll taxes and literacy tests. Over the decades, civil rights activists advocated against racial discrimination such as segregation, voter suppression laws, etc. The civil rights movement started to see major victories starting in the 1950s when the Supreme Court ruled in favor for civil rights with cases like Brown v. Board of Education. In short, after several nonviolent protests and sit-ins, the movement continued to gain national attention. On June 11, 1963, Kennedy proposed the Civil Rights Act of 1963, with no luck of it getting past the Rules Committee. In the same year, over 100,000 people marched on Washington to advocate for both civil and economic rights of African Americans. There, Martin Luther King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. Unfortunately, in November of the same year, JFK was assassinated. With LBJ now being president and being the former Senate Majority Leader, he was able to get the bill passed in the House and passed in the Senate after a 54-day-long filibuster. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 banned discrimination based on sex and race and helped in the effort of desegregating schools. However, despite the amount of good the Civil Rights Act of 1964 did, it did not stop literacy tests and other means of voter suppression. With voter suppression in the South still alive, the civil rights protests continued. After the 1964 elections, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference led by Martin Luther King Jr. and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee pushed for action from the federal government to protect racial minorities' voting rights. Starting in January 1965, civil rights leaders held demonstrations in Selma, Alabama. Unfortunately, on March 7, 1965, one of the marches were violently interrupted by police. Anywhere between 525 to 600 civil rights marchers walked out of Selma from the southeast on U.S. Highway 80. After the protesters crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, they met a wall of state troopers and county posse. John Cloud, the commanding officer, ordered the marchers to return home. Reverend Hosea Williams attempted to talk to the officer, but he made it very clear that there was nothing to discuss. Law enforcement then proceeded to knock many of the demonstrators down and beating them with nightsticks. Tear gas was fired and troopers charged on horseback into the crowd. Americans looked at the event in shock and horror once images of the event got out to the media. 17 of the demonstrators were hospitalized while 50 others were treated for less serious injuries. This horrible event became known as Bloody Sunday. 8 days after the event, President Lyndon Johnson sent a voting rights bill to Congress. Despite some hurdles, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 passed the Senate on May 26th. In the House of Representatives on July 9th. Thanks to the Voting Rights Act of 1965, literacy tests are now banned, and now there can be federal oversight of voter registration in places that have less than 50% of a non-white unregistered voter population. Another part of the bill did allow the U.S. Attorney General to investigate how poll taxes are used in state and local elections. However, poll taxes were banned on the state and local level in 1966. Election minute out.
Okay, folks, there goes another quick one, and we're going to give you one last one before we close into this, which is going to be how the Fair Housing Act got put into place.
Hello, and welcome to History Pod. On the 11th of April 1968, the Fair Housing Act, also known as Title 8 of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, was signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson.
In 1870, the 15th Amendment was
Civil
ratified,
Rights Act of
giving African-American males the right to vote.
outlawed
After the
discrimination
Reconstruction era,
based on
states
race,
systematically
colour, religion,
eliminated that right
sex,
to
or
illegal and
national
discriminatory
origin.
tactics such
Nevertheless,
as literacy tests,
significant
poll
obstacles
taxes, and
remained for
intimidation.
minorities
In the
who were
early 1960s, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, took responsibility to coordinate voting rights efforts for African Americans, including launching a campaign for voter registration. Their actions led to the adoption of the Voting Rights Act in August of 1965, which...
There we go. There we go. Let's go back with the Fair Voting Rights Act. Me screwing up my technology a little bit here. I thought I had one video stopped that I didn't, but we're going to go ahead and bring that out. And then we're going to bring on our guest. Hold on one second as we stop our screen share. Okay, and I'll bring myself back into it. And we are going to, it's 7:20, and we'll come back in, folks, next time on the Fair Housing Act. Since I did kind of screw up the video, we'll show it next week. But just to give you a feel for what it is, the 1968 Act expanded on previous acts and prohibited discrimination concerning the sale, the rental, and the financing of housing based on religion, race, national origin, sex, and as amended, handicap and family status. Known as Title VIII of the Act, it is also known as the Fair Housing Act of 1968. So folks, what I'm going to do right now is I always tell you, your call to action is voting rights is very important. The civil rights that we have for voting rights, basically you have your Fair Housing Act, you have your Voting Rights Act, and you have your, excuse me, Civil Rights Act. All of those together really form a lot of the foundation of what it is that we have as far as civil rights in this country, and those are under attack. So we need you to call your congressperson, and you need to tell your congressperson that you're, one, aware of the H.R. 4, which is the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and two, that you are aware of the For the People Act. And both of these acts basically is particularly with the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, puts back into place the pre-clearance, which was required before any changes are made to any law, which was gutted, by the way, in 2013. It forces the government to put back into law, which the Supreme Court took out, the pre-clearance provision. The pre-clearance provision basically said 180 days before any changes to any law concerning voting, they needed to go through the Department of Justice for pre-clearance. That is no longer the case. It has been gutted. And that is essentially what the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act puts back into law, which was in law in 1965. And the other one is the For the People Act, which basically expands upon those laws by giving 2 weeks of early voting. It also bans purging of the voting polls. It restores, again, the full protections of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which is a pre-clearance piece. It adds election security, finance reforms, grants to states to help replace voting machines, and also processes for auditing and securing election results, because that is an issue too, as we're also having our voting rights also being attacked by certain folks on the other side of the aisle looking to actually, if they don't like the results that come from free and open elections, that they're actually trying to change those things by taking control of the Secretary of State and actually trying to throw elections back to the states or back to the houses, and just having basically what's known as impartial, not impartial, but partisan election officials at a state level, where in the past we've had impartial election officials. This is very important. So the main thing that I think I want you to take away from this, as I tell you every week, please call your congressperson. Let them know that you're aware of both of these laws that are out there, have been passed in the House of Congress, that are trying to get by in the Senate, that have been denied, and let them know that you want them to get passed. You're aware of it. You're going to make sure that we get the people we want elected to Congress that are going to support these things, so that we can have free and fair and open elections in this country, and also so we can get rid of voter suppression. And it's not a Democrat, it's not a Republican thing or a Democratic thing. That's an American thing. It's a Democratic Big D thing. And now, without further ado, as I'm about halfway into what I do, and kind of sorry about the mess up on the video, but like I said, folks, I'll show it to you next week. I'm going to talk a little bit about first about our special guest. I want to really give him a great introduction. I've known this gentleman a long time. He's worked very hard to represent people on many different levels here. He's a local representative of ours. I'm going to bring his information up right now. We're actually talking about Supervisor Storck, and I want to get his information let me get my technology right. There we go. I need big letters so I can see this. This gentleman has done a lot. I've got a lot to talk about. Dan Storck, he's the Mount Vernon District Supervisor. And just for all you folks who are not from Virginia, particularly Fairfax County, in Fairfax County, we have 9 magisterial districts, of which Mount Vernon is one of those districts. Each one of those districts has a supervisor, and that supervisor represents a couple of 100,000 people. Fairfax County is a pretty big county, has I think a couple of million people, if I remember last count. Might be more than that. Someone will correct me on that, I'm sure. But it basically has 9 supervisors and has a chairman of the board of supervisors. It's kind of like the main big guy who's in charge. Dan Storck, let me tell you a little bit about him. He began his first term in the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors in January 1st of 2016. He currently leads the Fairfax County Green Initiatives. Also, the Embark and revitalization of the Richmond Highway and the Strategic Economic Task Force, and also the Mount Vernon Tourism Task Force. I mean, Dan does a lot. Renovation also of the original Mount Vernon High School, and also he's gotten past the approval of the new Lorton Community Center along the South County Police, along with the South County Police and Animal Shelter, and along with Lorton Library Innovations. That's a mouthful, but I can tell you this, there's a lot of things that have been changing in the South County portion of Fairfax County, of which I live. So I'm very much aware of these things. I know Dan Storck has been quite busy, along with the rest of his staff, and making sure these things get done. And we're happy to see it here in Fairfax County, particularly in the southern part of the county, which he represents. He's my supervisor. He also chairs the board's environmental committee, the audit committee. He vice chairs the economic advisory commission. He also serves as a joint board school environmental task force. They call it JET. Try to say that real quick. I'll say it again. Joint board / school board environmental task force. They call it JET for short. And also the Alexandria, District of Columbia, Fort Belvoir, and Prince William interjurisdictional committees, which he sits on. And the Council of Governments, which is the Chesapeake Bay and Water Resources Policy Committee. It's not done. He's got more he does here. Virginia Association of Counties, which is the board of directors for the Virginia Associations of Counties Energy Committee. He sits on that. I didn't put all that in there. I want to leave a little bit to talk to you a little bit about him personally. His personal life, Dan Storck has developed and owned several healthcare and benefits firms. He's a small business owner. He also holds an MBA and a BS in finance from the Miami University of Ohio. Not down south, but Ohio. He's a Midwest guy, and he's also a former board president of the Good Shepherd Housing, and also West Potomac High School Parent Teachers Association, Riverside Gardens Recreation Association, as well as a former Head Start administrator and a youth basketball coach. What else does Dan? Dan does a whole lot, but he's not done here. The best of Dan is by the legacy he leaves, and let me tell you who they are. Dan Storck is deeply grateful for his wife of more than 40 years. Her name is Deb. He has children, Ben, Katie, and John. He's very thankful for their support, because no man can do without a good woman beside him and in front of him and everywhere around him, along with fantastic children. He has a passion for history and brings to life his portrayal of Abraham Lincoln. If you're from this area, everybody knows that nobody does a better portrayal of Abraham Lincoln than Dan Storck. I should have put a picture in here. One of Supervisor Storck's philosophy of governing is with malice towards none and with charity for all. So folks, without further ado, I just want to bring into our stream there he is. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well, Mark. That was quite an introduction, and I I love what I've done, but more importantly, I love people and love the difference that we all can make. I mean, your show and connecting people and making a difference. I want to start with the civil rights clips that you had. I thought they were fantastic. I mean, and I'm a guy who I was very young then, but I remember that time. I was old enough to remember those times, and particularly the middle school and high school that I went to was very integrated, very active. We had a lot of protests. We had a very diverse group that was very committed to, I would say, racial justice and social justice. And so I really lived that, particularly in my mid to late teens, because that was a key part. So that for me, that a lot of that was real, even though I wasn't actually, doing what some of the folks really that made a difference were doing, freedom riding and protesting but they were clear parts of my upbringing in a social and kind of a historical sense. And particularly my own education was a key part of it. So I valued the clips that you showed. I thought they were very, very, very well done. I've not seen anything of that kind of that crisp and good quality and good oversight, good overview. So it's a great opportunity too.
It's just my technical inability to to make them come up properly, but they were good clips. I appreciate it, Dan. But those are all important things. But tell us more. Tell us more about you. I know I gave you a pretty good intro, but people really are for the first time, I guess, around the world at this point. This is the internet. Need to know about you and how you got to be supervisor and why you're doing this job. And you actually can talk about whatever you want to, Dan. Sure. So just feel free. Just you and me talking. Nobody's listening.
Well, I'm sure that's not true, but I mean, but more importantly, you can't live in the world that we live in today and not be connected, to the world. And you definitely can talk about Syria or Ukraine and really the horrors that those folks have gone through, but you can also talk about the U.S. and just some of the harm that's been committed, some of the issues that we are still wrestling with. I mean, we're not done. We're not done with social justice. We're not done with racial justice. We're not done with equal housing. We're not done with equal voting, if you will. And so, those are passions that I think are key parts of why I'm doing what I'm doing. Is I think I can make a difference, and I'm willing to work really hard to do that. So that's a function of not only the things that I've done, because I ran human service organizations. I ran Head Start programs in my youth. I was executive director of a Head Start and housing and health clinic, which got me involved with health clinics and frankly healthcare, which is ultimately what I became an entrepreneur in. So those threads connect through your life, but they connect with your first issue, which is making a difference, caring for people, and I was absolutely brought up that way. My mother she loved people, loved animals, she loved life, and so that's kind of imbued in me. I can't escape that, and she died about a year or so ago, so that's still in my being, and I can't, I got to live that way. I know she's still kind of speaking to me and making sure that I stay on that path of treating everybody, honorably and equally. So that passion is core. I have two core beliefs. I mean, I'll maybe just finish up with that.
Go ahead.
I talk about this all the time, Mark. In fact, anybody who's ever heard me probably rolls their eyes now because they've heard it for so many times. But there's two key things that I view my role and our community's focus is, which is first and foremost, as we redevelop our corridor, because there's a lot of redevelopment going along on Richmond Highway, and you and I have had previous conversations about it. We first and foremost cannot leave anybody behind. Our minimum standard, if you will, is if you're here now and you want to continue to live here, you're not going to be pushed out or gentrified out. You're going to have an opportunity to continue to live, work, play, learn, and grow old in your community. So that's a core, if you will, foundational commitment. And then the aspirational part of that, the way that you try to activate that is I believe that everybody, my role is to help each person and our community reach its full potential. So that full potential means obviously different things to different people, but it's what I view the role of government, what I view the importance of what we all can do to help and support somebody else in their life journey.
Well, you've got some interesting things that you're doing here, Dan, with the changes that are happening. And guess maybe first I'll kind of hone in on the small business piece. Now, I in the corridor that you're we're talking about here along Route 1, there's been a couple of different things that you're trying to do to help small businesses and help the community to get better skill sets, and also for people who are also trying to start small businesses or operating small business, how they can actually have a better time of it here, a more successful time of it here in along the Route 1 corridor in Mount Vernon. Do you have something you want to feed into that or say specifically about that? I want to use your words.
Yeah, sure. Would love to. A couple things on that. First off, even today, I was at the role and kind of something that I've been very involved with helping to create is that we had the second Veteran and Military Spouses Career Day. We had that at the new National Museum of the U.S. Army. The first one we did last fall, and my office was very involved not only in working with the fort and the commander, Seagraves, but also working with the Economic Development Authority, EDA, which is one of our developers of economics, but also to work with our Economic Development Initiative, which is the county office. And one of the pieces of that was I was able to get the county board to support us having a Fort Belvoir liaison. Mm-hmm. That means somebody on county staff their task is to work with Fort Belvoir and make sure that this largest employer in Fairfax County continues to be the largest employer in Fairfax County, continues to grow, but just as importantly, making sure that as they grow, the community around there is also benefiting. And this is one of the key ways is we have, as we all know, we have a difficult time filling all the positions that are available in Fairfax County. So this career day, again, the first one we did last fall was designed to connect with folks who are nearing retirement or potentially retirement, as well as spouses, to match them up to really all the different employers in the area. So this was an in-person event today. We had more than 150 job applicants there, and we had more than 30 companies that were there. And then tomorrow is the virtual version of that. Anybody can come in, and there's you name a major employer in Fairfax County, and they're there, and they will be there tomorrow, making sure that they connect with people who might be interested in working with them. So anything from technical jobs to Hilton, to Fairfax County Public Schools, to the county government as well. So you have those folks looking and hopefully providing opportunities for folks to get a job. And I'd say the other part of that is essential is making sure that we have better educational support on our corridor. Right now in my particular area, we have the closest community college area is about an hour and a half away by mass transit. If you want to drive, it's at least 45 minutes. So making sure that you have stepping stones. So we not only have a great educational K through 12 system here. I'm a former chairman of that board and was on the school board for 12 years. So I was very involved with that. But also you need that next step, right? You need after high school, what else is there? How else do you kind of work with folks? Some folks are going to go on to a four-year college, but most folks are not going to graduate from a four-year college. They need opportunities, and that has to do with ensuring that they have a career development paths, not only when they're in high school, which is one of the initiatives I had when I was on the school board, which is to provide and get our youth more involved with getting certifications for job skills, whether it's a Microsoft network manager or a cosmetology or auto body repair or just frankly computer programming. There's lots of different methods and pieces of that they can do.
Well, those are one of my questions for you, Dan. One of the questions I have for you was, I know we have the facility that's being built down, expanded with the new library, and then we also have the new school that's being repurposed. Are those facilities being used so that sort of training can happen there for folks who need to get certifications and things of that nature? And also that new facility that's being expanded down there at the library in Lorton? can that be used, or the other facility, as an incubator for small businesses, and maybe working with some sort of capital or resources that can be provided from county government to help those small businesses, incubate and get out there on their own, and help this particular area in Mount Vernon continue to grow and compete against, our bigger brother organizations, or Tyson's Corner and all those places are. I mean, we're nothing like those. So we got a lot of room for growth. We got a lot of room for transportation and railways to be put in here. But we're going to need some of that planning and some of that dedication to come from the folks at county government to say, let's put money into these small businesses and incubators. Let's put money into the people, like you said, about the certifications or whatever sort of resources. And also, as we bring more transportation to this area, like hopefully the metro or the other things, that this area has an opportunity to grow in all the ways that like our other counterparts have. I know I said a whole mouthful there, but what do you think about that?
I think you nailed it, Mark. You and I have talked some about this, but the most important thing we can do in any area has, I guess, a larger percentage of lower income folks, a larger percentage of folks who maybe not have the same opportunities, the same ability, if you will, to go up the ladder, the economic ladder, is to ensure that they have the tools and resources, and even more importantly, the support system that can enable them to do that. Now, how do you do that? You do that with a number of different programs, but the core of that is you have classes, you have presentations, you have economic entrepreneurial development classes and supports. How do we do that? The county has not only an economic development initiative and the EDA, both of which provide those classes and supports, but we also have entrepreneurship and incubation that we're this new. You mentioned the new former high school, the new soon-to-be Human Development Center. That's what I've named it, frankly, because it will have a broad range of human development. It'll start with the littlest kids. We're going to have early childhood classes there. It'll then go, frankly, all the way up to post high school, and that's when we're going to have a community college. Northern Virginia Community College will be there, and then we will have, as part of that same facility, many not-for-profits which will be supporting the community, whether it be housing or food or opportunities to develop themselves, address the community issues that they might have. But to me, the top of that pyramid, if you will, the most important part of that opportunity is to have incubation center, which we will have to provide support and technical, assistance to folks who have a particular idea or particular kind of business that they want to operate. In particular, this facility will have a commercial kitchen. One of the major issues and opportunities on the corridor is to help people where they are to grow to the next level. And a lot of the skill sets that we've found that folks have in our community is it's frankly cooking, and it's commercial catering. It's whether it's baking and all of those. I mean, food trucks are a major source of how you go up the economic ladder, right? You have a food truck, but you need a commercial kitchen to help you prepare stuff. This kitchen will provide the ability for you to go in and prepare your stuff, to the point that you can then put it on the food truck and you go out. But it is that entry point for somebody wanting to open their own restaurant, wanting to get their, if you will, the foot on the first rung of that ladder. And this facility will have that kitchen, commercial kitchen, will have that kind of kitchen support. So that's one piece of it. The other parts of it will clearly be more technical, because we are going to have high-speed internet, and we will have all kinds of technical and computer supports. The community college classes will have absolutely a computer skills and support classes for that. So there's a number of different elements. And then the last piece I would say is this: one of the other strengths of our community is that we have a lot of very successful students and in turn adults with the performing arts, whether it's music or the plays and dramas. We will have at this new Human Development Center a theater, which will have professional theater, so it will be employing people in the community, as well as lighting and stage management, all those different pieces of that. You tie that to the food service, performing arts. We have more than 2 million visitors a year in tourism here, and providing evening opportunities, something else that they can do in the evening is an important part of what the folks who put together tour groups and look for opportunities. They want things to do in the evening, as well as they want places to eat. So you combine those elements in this facility, you're going to have a ready-made audience, as well as opportunities for people who want to test out their own skills and build their own abilities to go up that economic ladder. So those are some key points. There probably are some others, but I'll leave it at that at the moment.
I think those are some real key points. And the other thing I'd probably add to that I'd like to see, and I think other small businesses and potential small business would like to see with Fairfax County government, is maybe saying, well, for services and things that are being brought to an area that's looking for more economic growth, that the acquisition services maybe target the companies that are in the Mount Vernon area to provide the service when they're buying those services or products, as opposed to people who are not from our area. Let their money go back towards helping the community. What do you think?
I think that to me is a core part of how you help communities, individuals bootstrap, right? You provide opportunities, you hire local, you provide entrepreneurs and small businesses, local entrepreneurs, small businesses, chances to get that work. Because I mean, as an entrepreneur, I'm smiling as I think about my own start, right? Let's just say it was incredibly difficult. I mortgaged my house. I frankly didn't make a whole lot of money for the first couple of years. I scraped and I built relationships and ultimately found a niche. I started in one place and then I went over to another place, right? It was one of those things that you start somewhere and you just kind of have to zigzag until you find what your opportunity is. And that's a key part of how we support that, is by buying, purchasing, and supporting those small businesses.
Well, I think Mount Vernon is a special place. It's got a lot of historical things that are happening here in Mount Vernon. I don't think necessarily we've taken full advantage for the people who are here in Mount Vernon to benefit from all of the historical things that happened. You mentioned earlier, tourism and other things, but there's more things. I think that if there's some way, and maybe I hate to bring up ideas and not have anything to contribute, but maybe that's one of the things I'll come back and talk to you about, Supervisor Storck, is how you can really use the folks who are in this area to build upon the tourism capability and the rich history that is in the Mount Vernon area. And maybe along with maybe some tweaking to the acquisition laws, Fairfax County, they might be able to maybe make a few other things happen, especially given what's happening with the new facility and the school, and also what's going on in the facility down the road with the expansion of the library. I don't know what other things that you think would be good, but I'd like to see that.
Yeah, our area is really based upon three major kind of employment types. One is tourism and the hospitality industry. There's a huge amount of that, and that's going to continue to grow because we just opened the National Museum, the U.S. Army, and we have a number of other facilities. That's kind of one leg of the stool, if you will. The second major leg of the stool I mentioned earlier, which is Fort Belvoir and federal government employment. I mean, that's highly paid, well-established, great opportunities, and working closely with them to make sure that they connect and they are benefiting the community by the work that they do. And then the third leg of that stool for us locally is healthcare. We're the only area in Fairfax County for sure that has two major hospital facilities. One is Mount Vernon Hospital, which is literally almost next door to where I am, and the other is the Fort Belvoir Community Hospital, which is a huge hospital facility treating veterans and their needs. And obviously, they hire a lot of of healthcare workers, nurses, and aides, and
Well,
orderlies.
you also, sir, you don't want to leave out the Fairfax, where there's a lot of retirees there and
Yep.
a lot of support facilities that are there for people at various needs as far as, their mobility and their health. But you're right. My father has stayed there. They've done a great job. He's had knee replacements at the hospital. Obviously, he's retired military, clearly goes to Fort Belvoir. So there's a lot of things. How do you think this area can expand and complement even more so on that? I know you're in the healthcare business. What's your thoughts on that?
I think the key is that we first off have a lot of training facilities. We don't have sufficient amount. We have a nursing program that's over in Springfield, which isn't very far away, but we also have a medical and dental assisting program at our local high school. Those two are really critical parts of that, but we don't have some of the other training that we need that's nearby, which is really the reason why Northern Virginia Community College, we need this branch facility that they're going to open up at the original Mount Vernon High School. I call it the Human Development Center. So having them provide classes and entry level and other classes there will further add to those employment opportunities. Ultimately, I see it, essentially looking for ways to get involved with some of the rehabilitative medicine. As you mentioned before, Mount Vernon Hospital is frankly one of the leaders in our area in rehabilitative medicine. And as you might expect, Fort Belvoir has a number of those kinds of facilities and skills because of the number of veterans that they see, and these are wounded warriors that need extra support and care, and we can clearly complement what they're offering there.
Well, I think some of the other things, since there's so much technology in the area, and that helping more companies, and I know in the Tysons area, they have the startups there and the investment in the incubators there. Maybe there's some things that we can look at, particularly companies that are providing, or, there's the feds and they've got their piece with the hub zones and all of that. I don't know where the county stands in looking at companies that are providing specific type of services in areas where we are in Mount Vernon, where there may be some sort of resources the county can have to help those small businesses or people transition from skill sets as W-2s into, their own little business, helping to create more revenue for the county. But I think that's something that I'd be happy to work with from the folks in the caucus to maybe give you ideas of some things that, might work.
I would love that. The county just started an initiative that's focused on small women and minority-owned businesses, and that really is part of our focus. Is we recognize that the percentages of women and minority-owned businesses is still very, very small, and we have some funding that we put together to support and encourage those kinds of business development. I had a meeting with the gentleman probably 3 or 4 weeks ago. Just on that. He was a veteran, and he was a minority member, and he was looking for support in starting his business. And I spent a lot of time and pointed him in some direction and connected him with really potential funding sources, et cetera. So he sees, I think, the opportunity, but as we've talked, as it's the difficulty of starting your own business, it's just that big. And he had an operational business, been doing it for a couple of years, but it's still, he hadn't been able to scale it up because he needs a little bit more money, a little bit more support, and all the things that you constantly work on, that you need if you're going to get yourself to the next level and the level after that. So.
Well, you're right about that, Supervisor Storck. You really need to have the investment in those businesses. And it really starts with the county acquisition laws, or that can be tweaked to make certain things happen. They're saying, well, we got to put resources here. Your budget is a reflection of your values and your priorities. And if you're saying, well, if we want to put 10% of the dollars here and say we want to target it to be able to have these sort of businesses have an opportunity to grow, then those things need to happen. So I'm glad to hear that you're a partner in that, because the same sort of thing needs to happen more so on the state level and on the federal level.
Yeah.
And these are the sort of things that having partnership at a local, state, and federal, and private sector is ways to make that happen. So
It's
go ahead, sir.
amazing, particularly in Virginia, because Virginia doesn't, they restrict what you can do in terms of how you support women and minority-owned businesses. You have to be careful. So the county's put together a program that obviously complies with all that, but we are not doing enough. We want to do more. We've put aside a lot of money to help small businesses grow, particularly women and minority-owned businesses. So if anybody has a question and they're interested, please contact me or my office, and we would be happy to talk with them, whether they live in Mount Vernon or not. I'm happy to kind of connect them to the sources and opportunities that are within Fairfax County for them. And the easiest way to do that would probably just email me, which is mtvernon, that's Mount Vernon @fairfaxcounty.gov.
Well, there you go. That's what I always ask. We're getting near that 8 o'clock hour, and I ask people to give their social media handles and their contacts. Is that the best way to get you, or do you have any other social media you want to put out there, Dan?
I would say that's probably the simplest way. I mean, we have a Facebook site too, and I have a Twitter account. I mean, those are all key parts of what I do. I can give you that to just a minute. I'll tell you what that is. It's not coming up for me now. Hold on.
If they don't know it specifically, they can always go in there and put in Mount Vernon, right?
Yeah, they put in Mount Vernon, they'll get me. That's the ones I have, and or Dan Storck.
Or Dan Storck going there. I don't know whether you guys are on Instagram, but you probably are.
Yep.
And put in your name, they can find you, right?
Yeah, they absolutely can. And I am extremely partial, as you can tell, to small business and startups. I've been doing this for now about 30 years, and
okay.
And the first, I guarantee you, the first 3 or 4 were just rough. They just were rough. And the good news now is that I'm actually at a point in my life now that I have an administrator who, since she runs a business, I don't spend a lot of time there, but I still have my hands on it because, if you will, my retirement and all that other stuff ultimately ties into it. But more importantly, I'm deeply committed to the people that I've hired. In fact, my administrator of this other business has been with us 27 years. So, wow. Yeah, he started with us when he's 18 years old. He's just an amazing, I'll say kid, but amazing adult now. He just is somebody who really has a wonderful, warm, caring, strong demeanor. He's African American himself, so he has really been part and parcel to the core staff member. My staff there is definitely 60% probably minority, Hispanic, African American, Asian. I mean, it's that kind of a place that we've just kind of grown up together, and my long-term employees have really all been just deeply committed to the healthcare that we provide to folks. So.
Well, Mount Vernon is the highest out of all the magisterial districts, has the largest amount of African Americans, Latino, and Asian Americans. Maybe not the largest Asian, but I know probably African Americans, Latinos here in Mount Vernon. So, that's a large part of our community here. And I appreciate all that you do and what you're going to continue to do to support Mount Vernon. Question for you. And as I ask all my folks that it gets near this witching hour, you were king for a day, and you got a magic wand, you could make something happen, and there's no stopping it. What would you do?
I think the most important thing, and you did cover it in your kind of your opening, is the injustice of a lot of U.S.'s history is one that deeply tells. I'm a big fairness person, right? Deeply troubles me. And I went to it was really wonderful event that the Fairfax County Library was putting on, where you could put on these 360 goggles and you literally could live, you could insert yourself into a situation where you were experiencing and feeling the life of somebody who was being deeply discriminated against or otherwise being really poorly treated. You can't go through that and not recognize or not feel that is just that level of injustice. You want to push some kind of reset button and say, no, you want everybody to have the same opportunities that I had, and that we can't change that unless we change that, right? It's not going to just happen because we wish it. It's going to happen because we
actually do something.
Yeah, we actively work at it, and that would be my wish, is to give everybody that opportunity. And Mark, you know this maybe as well as I do too, that a lot of it has to do with the kind of assets and the kind of confidence that our parents pass on to us, and a lot of that has to do with their own upbringing, and their own experiences. And so for me, that would be a way of giving everybody that, if not so much an equal chance, because it has to be really more than that. It has to be an equitable chance. So
equitable. There you go. Equity. That is the key word.
Equitable opportunity. Equitable opportunity is I would say that's my watchword. Because
I'll tell you one thing. There's a few more things I'd love to ask you. I want to hold us to our. I said I'd only keep you till 8 o'clock, but I guess that goes with your philosophy about what you believe about governing, and what you just said kind of it folded right into that. So Dan, I appreciate that. I've known you for quite a few years. I know you try to do your best. Nobody's perfect, but I know you're out there slugging away. As long as you're in the fight, you're getting something done. We're getting rid of voter suppression, and we're continuing to go ahead and win and do what we need to do as Democrats here in Virginia and around the country. So I appreciate your efforts, and I do applaud you, because you're out there actually doing it, and you got to love a guy who's actually in the fight. So continue, and best wishes to you, and God bless you on your new grandchild.
Yes, sir. Thank you. To you, sir. Thank you.
Hey, so we're going to go ahead and end it as we always end it. We usually end it with a little bit of Bob. And so we're going to do that now and go ahead and get things started here. We'll see you next time as I get my technology working right here. Hold on. I've had a tough day today with technology for some reason. Here we go. There it is. Bob Marley. Dan, thanks for coming here and being on the Virginia Democratic Small Business Caucus Show. And we hope to see you back here again at another time. See you later.
Okay.
We're getting ready to end our broadcast here. Here we go.